The war with Iran has fully resumed. So, how will this war be fought? And how will Trump break away from the old state of the previous round of conflict? Now, all eyes are on whether Trump will launch a ground operation. If so, what would the objective be? That's our first topic today. Also, Trump has announced a national address for 9 p.m. tonight. The whole country is going crazy guessing what he'll say. All right, let's hear Feng Wei's take on it, shall we? Welcome to Good Morning America with Feng Wei. Hello to our YouTube viewers and our listeners on Sound of Hope Silicon Valley FM 96.1. The U.S. continues to bomb Iran. The entire coastline from east to west has been heavily bombarded, with strikes reaching into the north-central part of the country. Of course, the U.S. military has its specific targets. The media is now most focused on what Trump's next big move will be and how this round of conflict differs from before. In a recent interview, Trump was asked if he would rule out a landing operation. Trump replied that he absolutely would not do that. He said, "Sometimes it's necessary," referring to a landing operation, and added that we have the people who can do it. Then Trump started mentioning the campaign to eliminate ISIS and the commander, named General Kane, who is now the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So the media followed up, asking if General Kane could do it. Trump said yes. Of course, at this point, we're talking about a landing operation. Why? Because of how General Kane eliminated ISIS back then. It was through ground combat. In 2017, General Kane served in Iraq as a Special Forces commander. Then, in 2018, when the campaign against ISIS began, General Kane was promoted to Deputy Commander of the Joint Special Operations Command. He then joined forces with local allies, including the Iraqi government forces, the Kurds, and the Syrian Democratic Forces, to attack the ISIS caliphate. It had ravaged the Middle East for 7 years, seizing territory and establishing a state within a state the size of the UK. Do you all remember that? The caliphate once threatened the capital, Baghdad, but 4 years after its founding, the Obama administration was essentially helpless. Trump brought in General Kane, and it was wiped out in less than 2 months. As a result, General Kane's career skyrocketed. I mean that in a positive way. He became the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for Trump's 47th term. So when referring to the fight against ISIS, it means ground combat. A landing operation. Of course, the Trump administration hasn't announced any definite military plans, nor would they, so everything is in a state of anticipation. But we can see some clues from the bombing actions. Besides Revolutionary Guard facilities, the U.S. is also hitting Iranian army military installations. Previously mined areas along the coast have been hit, including airport defenses on Keshem Island. Targeted bombings were also carried out on Karg Island's defenses. Military experts say these are all moves preceding a landing operation. And another thing, online reports say, I haven't verified this, but the U.S. Central Command has reportedly deployed more amphibious vessels in recent weeks. Now, here's my take. If there's a landing, the goal still isn't to topple the Iranian regime. I don't see that intent from Trump. It's about controlling the strait. This strait could include the islands in the middle, like Greater Tunb and Lesser Tunb, and also Keshem Island, and even including the Iranian coastline north of the Strait of Hormuz. And now, under bombardment, Iran is starting to soften its stance, releasing a U.S. citizen who's actually an Iranian American, an American-born Iranian. He was doing charity work in Iran and was detained in December 2024. Now, this citizen has safely left and is in good health. Trump tweeted, saying, "The U.S. appreciates Iran's gesture of goodwill." Well, both sides are using a mix of carrots and sticks. Meanwhile, regarding what Trump said yesterday about targeting Iran's economic infrastructure, like power plants, water plants, refineries, and bridges, Iran shot back, saying, "If you attack, we'll launch widespread strikes on economic infrastructure across the entire Gulf region." It's another round of this. A hits Iran, Iran hits B. It's just thug tactics, right? They can't or won't face the U.S. military directly, so they hold civilians or civilian resources hostage, just like kidnappers. That's the style. And the UK's Daily Telegraph just reported that the Houthis are ready to block the Red Sea. That's huge news. I checked their source, but there's nothing specific, just 3 so-called anonymous sources, so it's unconfirmed. We know blocking the Red Sea means blocking the Bab el-Mandeb Strait at the southern end, where 12% of global shipping passes daily, and 20% goes through the Strait of Hormuz. Will the Houthis actually do it? I'm not sure. First, as I've said before, in May last year, the US hit the Houthis hard, and they were intimidated. Second, blocking the Bab el-Mandeb Strait comes with a price. It would directly provoke Saudi Arabia. If blocking Hormuz is choking the world, blocking Bab el-Mandeb is choking one country, Saudi Arabia, because Saudi helps move oil to the Red Sea, loading ships at Yanbu to head south through the strait to Asia. So ships from Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, and China all need that route. If you choke that point, you choke Saudi Arabia. And Saudi is their northern neighbor, right next door, with their military right there. So with US support, if the Saudi military moves south, would the Houthis face total destruction? That's why they're hesitant. Even though they fought Saudi for 10 years without being wiped out, it's only because Saudi lacked the resolve. Long-term aerial bombing without daring to send troops, no ground forces. But if Saudi Arabia really deploys ground troops with United States military backing, the Houthis will have to do the math. Would they still dare to do this? It's a very tough call. Of course, when Iran speaks, they just say whatever, It might not be reliable. That's my view. Okay, next, let's talk about Graham's legacy, giving the president a so-called tariff cannon. We know that after Trump took office, he's used tariffs as a weapon, universal tariffs, imposing them on all countries, then negotiating over and over. In the end, except for the CCP in Canada, everyone was reeling. But then it was overturned by the Supreme Court, right? So the point is, tariffs are set by Congress. Mr. President, you can only use them in limited circumstances, under specific conditions. What are those limited and specific conditions? Sections 232 and 201. These are called Sections 212 and 301. They can only be used within their specific scope, not just whenever you want. Okay, so regarding the CCP violating United States sanctions on Iran and Russia, what can the United States do? The United States could use secondary sanctions. It's an option, but it's an aggressive move that could easily trigger a diplomatic conflict. Then the CCP would retaliate by choking off America's, rare earths? But the late United States Senator Graham took a step ahead. Before he passed, he pushed for a sanctions bill against Russia, authorizing the United States president to impose tariffs of up to 100% on countries that purchase Russian energy. And the CCP and India are the main buyers of Russian energy, so it directly targets those giving money to Russia. Now, what does this move mean? It means shifting the responsibility to Congress, making it the will of the United States Congress, which is also the will of the American people. Because how is the will of the American people expressed? Through Congress. So in this regard, it's like backing the president, giving him a tariff cannon that he can fire at any time. As for this bill, it'll be introduced in Congress as early as this week. The goal is to target the top 5 importers of Russian oil and gas. Additionally, the CCP and India are clearly the top 2 targets for sanctions under this new bill. The draft of this bill allows the president to decide whether to impose tariffs of up to 100% on relevant countries, companies, and individuals to hit Russia's energy export revenue. Now, if this bill passes, it has 2 functions. Besides giving the president a tariff cannon, there are 2 other roles. First, those who dislike the tariffs can't sue because it's passed by Congress. You have to go to the Supreme Court to sue Congress for unconstitutional legislation, which is way too difficult. So the second symbolic meaning is that this is the first time Congress has authorized and explicitly told the president that you can use tariffs as a geopolitical tool, not just for trade disputes. So the significance is quite large. Okay, next is a small news item. The United States government will start imposing a 25% tariff on most imported goods from Brazil next week. Previous United States investigations have shown that Brazil does indeed engage in unfair trade practices. What kind of behavior? For example, demanding that American tech companies, high-tech companies like X, Meta, and Google delete specific political content. Then second, it's giving Mexico and India preferential tariff treatment, which is unfair to the United States. Third is the poor enforcement of intellectual property protection. Fourth is setting up tariff barriers for American ethanol entering Brazil. In short, this whole thing uses Section 301, drawing conclusions based on Section 301. And it's gone through hearings. Ultimately, the result is imposing a comprehensive 25% tariff on Brazil, covering most products. So even though the Supreme Court rejected a blanket grant of tariff power to the president, but the president can use the approach I just mentioned. This is an example. A detailed, targeted method using specific provisions like Section 301 investigations to reach a conclusion is perfectly legal and compliant. The result is a blow to Brazil. We all know that Brazil's President Lula doesn't get along with Trump politically, so this round is also, how should I put it, a punitive action against Lula. Okay, let's look at this next. A few weeks ago, you might remember another matter where the Supreme Court rejected Trump's challenge to birthright citizenship. The rejection, but one of the justices, Kavanaugh, who also voted to reject it, said we can't rule that way, but you can seek legislation from Congress. So in his court opinion, Kavanaugh pointed out a path for Trump. Because the 14th Amendment, while granting citizenship to those born in the United States, mentions exceptions for children of diplomats or foreign occupying forces. So invoking that same spirit, if the parents aren't U.S. citizens, their children shouldn't have citizenship either. You can write the legislation that way. Action followed immediately after those words. Congressman Stube quickly introduced a bill, and Trump tweeted that it would be on the Senate's agenda this week. Congressman Stube said in the media that they've obtained testimony stating that 1.5 million children of Chinese descent were born through the birth tourism industry. They come to the United States, give birth, and then go back. These 1.5 million people will all be Americans in the future and could even run for president. So he said they're born here, are now U.S. citizens, and then return to China. No other country in the world. Maybe only 2 or 3 other countries do this, and they're countries like Congo. He said the United States and Congo are on the same level. He said no country, allows this kind of thing to happen. No country in the world would do this. Congress must implement regulations for such matters. If this bill passes, although birthright citizenship isn't abolished, the abuse of it, specifically the phenomenon of birth tourism, could be largely eliminated. But there's a caveat here and additional explanation. Since the birthright citizenship rejection passed 6-3, if Kavanaugh essentially pointed away and said, hey, if you do it this way, I'll change my vote, then it becomes 5-4. It's not enough yet. You need a 5-4 majority, right? So we still need Roberts or Barrett to come around. Well, will they come around? Right now, of course, theoretically, it's an unknown factor. But if Congress actually passes a bill, then you'd have to argue that a congressional act is unconstitutional, which is much harder. So this is indeed something that's favorable for the rejection of birthright citizenship, specifically Trump's stance on it. All right, next, let's talk about this. The Save America Act is basically in its final months to pass. We all know that next Monday, the Senate will reconvene, and there are basically only 3.5 months left until the midterm elections. So this is the final opportunity for the Save America Act. So now, Republicans in Congress are trying every possible way. I'll first tell you about 3 methods. One is to tie the Save America Act to the NDAA. What is the NDAA? The NDAA is the defense budget. As you know, with the defense budget, no one in either party thinks it shouldn't pass because it's a matter of national security. But by tying them together, can it pass? Well, I'll get to that in a bit. First, let me talk about this. The 2 biggest problems for the Save America Act to pass. So here's the issue. The Save America Act hasn't passed. President Trump said this is my absolute #1 priority. If you don't pass it, I won't sign anything. It's basically forcing Congress to pass this Save America Act. That's the first point. The second point, the problem is that there are only 3.5 months left of unified control where everything is on the Republican side. Another line of thinking is to quickly pass whatever can be passed. In 3 months, if we lose one of the 2 chambers, it's game over. So think about it. These 2 demands are in conflict, right? It's actually quite contradictory. On one hand, Trump wants to show determination and doesn't want to pass anything but this one. But if he wins, well, of course, he expects the Republicans to continue governing after the midterms, so unified control remains. When I say 3 powers, I don't mean the separation of powers. I mean the 2 chambers plus the presidency. So if all 3 remain unified, then there will be plenty of time later. But if it doesn't pass, then with only 3.5 months left, why wouldn't you hurry up and pass what you can, including the birthright citizenship issue we just discussed? So it's very contradictory. Or you could say the Republicans have to take a gamble. Which path will you take and what measures will you adopt? Let me ask you all, what do you think? Trump is clearly taking the first approach, which is to say, if the Save America Act doesn't pass, nothing else passes. On the other hand, Congress wants to hurry up and pass things, pushing through as much as possible because it won't be our world anymore. We won't have this unified control. What do you all think? Do you agree with Trump putting everything on the Save America Act, or should they pass as much as they can? All right, and also, let's go back to what I said about trying every possible way. One way is to tie the Save America Act to the National Defense Authorization Act. And indeed, the House did just that. The day before yesterday, it was 215 votes to 211 votes. As I told you, this is Johnson's doing. With such a razor-thin majority, like a strand of hair, it still managed to pass like this. Of course, the Republican vote that went missing was from someone in Florida, not Thomas Massie. I'm just setting the record straight for him. Well, anyway, they tucked the Save America Act in there. Since the defense budget bill has to pass, does that mean the Save America Act will definitely pass too? Not at all. It'll be 100% blocked by a filibuster. So because the voter ID requirement in the Save America Act is just too critical for the Democrats. They don't care how long the defense budget bill gets delayed, they will definitely block you. This is my political judgment, 100% chance of a filibuster to block it. So you still need 60 votes. Therefore, doing this bundling in the House is just a way to show the determination of the House Republicans. It doesn't actually help the bill pass. So the second strategy they thought of was to tuck the Save America Act into the State Department's budget. Because you know, the State Department's budget goes through what's called a reconciliation. Reconciliation only needs 50 votes to pass. So the Republicans in the Senate count up 50 votes plus Vance's vote. That would indeed be enough, but there's still one obstacle, which is that it doesn't comply with the Byrd Rule. The Byrd Rule? What is the Byrd Rule? It means that a reconciliation bill can only include things related to the budget. It can't include things unrelated to the budget. What does requiring an ID for elections have to do with the budget? It has nothing to do with finances. So the Senate parliamentarian called the congressional programmer, or rather the procedural rules officer, will block it. He'll say you can't bundle it in. Trump's solution was to say, hey, Thune, fire him and replace him with someone who listens. But Thune feels that firing him is just as hard as getting the filibuster, just as difficult and politically incorrect, so Thune won't do it. That path is blocked too. Is this a bit confusing? Can you follow? This is how the Senate operates. So the third plan is to, set aside a special budget of $10 billion. Of course, then they tie the Save America Act to it. Well, not exactly tie it because you can't bundle it or it violates the Byrd Rule, right? So what's this $10 billion for? It's to say, hey, states, if you check IDs, we'll give you money. If you don't check IDs, we won't give you money. It's basically a bribe. But because this elections are a huge deal, just too important. Blue states won't be tempted by your money. Only red states would want it. But the problem is in blue states, and red states don't really have election issues anyway. So what's the point of giving them more money? This is a very weak move. It just shows how badly Republicans want the Save America Act to pass and how many tricks they've tried. But none of it worked. Well, the Senate returns next Monday, and it's all or nothing. I saw something Vance said that I think makes a lot of sense. He said America is the earliest democracy. I'll add to that, we're facing the most basic democratic issue, something 80% of voters agree on, which is requiring an ID to vote. As it turns out, the Senate, elected by the voters, actually blocked it and it didn't pass. So let me say it again. Regarding the Save America Act, I have these three opinions. First, it should pass. 80% of voters support it, right? It should pass. Second, it looks like it can't pass right now. Third, it must pass. As for how it will pass, I don't know. We'll just see what happens next month. So Feng Wei will continue to follow this matter because it has a very, very big impact on America's future. I've always said it's the #1 priority. Even though I don't say it every day, it is the #1 priority. Its impact on American politics. So with 1 month left, I'll keep following this topic. Okay, next, let's talk about what President Trump is going to say tonight. This has been teased for 2 days now. Thursday night at 9 o'clock prime time, Trump will give a national address. Okay, what's it about? The White House press secretary, who just returned from maternity leave, Caroline Leavitt, said that, as usual, anonymous sources are all guessing what President Trump will say in his Thursday night speech. But the truth is, no one knows what he'll say. That's exactly why you should watch. To keep the mystery, we won't say anything. Just go watch it. So he wants to build up the mystery to the max, build the atmosphere to the max, so the whole country watches the program tonight. Okay, just a heads up. Of course, one of the viewers will be Fang Wei. After watching, Fang Wei will give you the latest interpretation as soon as possible, okay? So pay attention tonight. If you understand English, watch the speech. If not, just stay tuned to Fang Wei's time. For new viewers, remember to subscribe to get notifications. Subscribe and hit the bell, okay? Subscribe and hit the bell. I'll say it 3 times because it's important. Subscribe and hit the bell. That way you won't miss Feng Wei's most timely translation after the speech tonight, okay? Okay, good. So the expected attendees tonight include members of the president's cabinet, including the CIA director, the FBI director, and the director of the Office of National Intelligence, and the Secretary of Homeland Security. You see, they're all security officials. Now, due to scheduling conflicts, some cabinet members won't be able to attend, but otherwise everyone will be there. So everyone who can come will come, highlighting the importance of this. Okay, so let's start guessing what it's about. One guess is the Iran war, that Trump is going to make a big move and explain it to the nation. The second one is still related to what we just talked about, the Save America Act, because there's only 1 month left. It must pass, yet there's no way for it to pass. So how will it pass? CBS ran a report saying they expect, based on intelligence they've received, that President Trump's speech will cover something previously unreported. Content about the CCP's alleged interference in U.S. elections, saying that Beijing hacked into U.S. voter databases. The CIA knew beforehand, but they didn't tell Trump during his first term. So Trump has hinted that the speech will focus on the election. Okay, and at the same time, in 2021, the U.S. National Intelligence Council released an assessment saying the U.S. intelligence community concluded with a high level of confidence that the CCP did not try to influence the election results. It says, our report shows no evidence of any foreign actors attempting to alter voter registration, voting, vote counting, or any other technical aspects of the 2020 election process. So the intelligence agencies had a conclusion back then. But the problem is, that was the conclusion back then. What is the conclusion tonight? Will tonight's conclusion be overturned? What do you think it will be? Let me read this again. Blue 48304. Our viewer says, the Save America Act is the foundation of foundations. If you can mail in ballots and steal election results at will, what's the point? Yes, that's right. So the oldest democracy is facing the simplest, most common sense election issues that it can't even solve. This is currently what's called an irony in English, a very ironic dilemma. We'll see if America has the wisdom to solve this problem or the will to break through this situation.